Coming up on Phillies Nation, presented by BQ Basement Systems, Pat and Corey give us their 2014 season preview. The guys break down the schedule over the first month and how it could impact the rest of the year. I've got reader comments and questions, and Natalie checks in from the Phillies 5K. That's all ahead on Phillies Nation.
Welcome to the first Phillies Nation of 2014. It's presented by BQ Basement Systems. I am Pat Gallen. He is Corey Simon. We're at McStew's in Levittown, just off New Falls Road. Baseball's back, brother.
Pat, I'm glad to be back for another season. And you know, whether the Phillies contend or flounder this season, going to be no shortage of storylines. It's either going to be the last hurrah for this aging core or the beginning of a rebuild.
All right, let's start with that aging core. And one guy that we can focus in on, of course, is Ryan Howard. He says that he's healthy, he's back, and that leg is healthy. And that's really the key to him getting back to being a power hitter. Now, I don't think we can expect the Ryan Howard of old, the 56 home runs, the 140 RBIs. But if the Phillies are to contend, they're going to need something big from the middle of the order, and really that starts with Ryan Howard.
Like you said, the 50 home runs, not going to be there anymore. Ryan Howard probably isn't even a 40 home run hitter anymore, but if the Phillies can get 30 and 100 out of him, they'll be satisfied with that. The Phillies actually got 30 and 100 out of the first base position as a total last season because Darren Ruff performed so well in the second half of the season.
Sure.
The main thing with Ryan Howard is that on-base percentage. He can't be coming into this year with a 306 on-base percentage, a 310 on-base percentage. And if you look at the projections, he's projected to hit around 240, 310, 15 homers. I mean, a lot of these projection sites have him playing 95 to 100 games. So the Phillies need him to stay on the field, and they need him to be more disciplined at the plate. That's something Ryan Sandberg worked with him on this offseason.
Yeah, I don't think that he needs to be the same guy that he was 5 years ago, but you mentioned the health. That is super important, and the on-base percentage, I think, is important as well, because if he's in the middle of the order and he's there for 140 games, you can pretty much lock him in for close to 100 RBIs. He just fall into that, basically. Sure. So we will look at the health of Ryan Howard. We'll be keeping an eye on that all year long. At the top of the order, it's Jimmy Rollins and it's Ben Revere. Not in that order. It'll be Ben Revere at the top with Jimmy Rollins batting second. But with that said, I think we know exactly what Jimmy Rollins is to this point. I think we should focus in a little bit more on Ben Revere and what he brings to the table.
Well, yeah, if you look at Jimmy over the last 5 years, it's been about a 250 batting average, a 317 OBP, and that's not going to cut it this year. Jimmy did show impressive plate discipline in the spring, 7 walks, and if you look at last year, it was one of the highest walk rates of his career. Like you said, though, Ben Revere is the key. The Phillies need Ben Revere to hit 290 like he did last year before he got hurt. They need him to get on base via the walk. And if the two of those guys can combine for maybe 160 runs scored and 50-plus steals, you know that you're having a good year at the top of the order.
Yeah, I really think the key is Revere here. He had 305 last season before he got hurt, a near 340 on-base percentage. If he can get on base at that clip, continue where he was before he got injured last season, I mean, I think you're looking at a pretty decent leadoff hitter. I know that he's never going to hit home runs. He's not a power hitter, but I think he can deal with it if he gets on at a 340 or a 350 clip.
Right. What I will say is that when the Phillies were going their best from 2008 to 2011, it was when Jimmy Rollins and Shane Victorino were setting the table at the top and going first to third on singles and setting up double steal opportunities. So if the Phillies can set the table for Chase Utley, Ryan Howard, Marlon Byrd, they're going to have a pretty successful offensive season despite what you saw this spring.
You mentioned Chase Utley had a tough spring, but they're going to have to count on him again in the middle of that order. And these older guys, it's going to be tough to lean on them for 162 games. They're just not that kind of team anymore. But with Chase Utley, I know that you're a little leery of him moving forward. I think I'm okay with Chase Utley for the most part. It's when you get into the dog days of summer, deeper into the year, can you trust him to stay healthy? And can you trust him to play? Because he plays at 150% every game. Is he going to be able to do that for the duration of the season?
You know, he has the last couple of years. When he's come back from his injuries, has played pretty much at 100%, going every game, full hustle, you know. But with Chase Utley, the thing that worries me is the power really sagged as the year went on in 2013. He ended up having a decent season, hit 284, 348 OBP, 18 to 20 homers. However, the last 40-so games of the season, his slugging percentage was under 400. Right. And he only had like 4 extra base hits in those final 40 games. So that is definitely something you worry about. I don't think Utley's a 25 home run guy anymore, but if he can get on base a lot, again, setting the table for these power guys, if Utley can give you 35 doubles, it's going to be a pretty good year.
Give me 290, Chase Utley, give me 18 home runs, and just stay healthy. That's really what all you can ask for from Chase Utley. Let's move on to the outfield. Marlon Byrd's in town. Dominic Brown's out there as well. Really, if you want to break it down, defense is sort of a key in the outfield. It was a problem last season.
Absolutely.
I'm looking at Dominic Brown to take the next step forward, not only offensively with more consistency, but really defensively as well. He sort of takes weird routes to balls. If he can clean that up a little bit, left field will be fine. But also with Marlon Byrd, you're hoping that he can be a middle-of-the-order bat that he really hasn't been in his career, but they're going to need him to be.
I love the Marlon Byrd signing,
Really?
personally, because not only is Marlon Byrd kind of at a new point in his career with the retooled swing,
Yeah.
but he provides very good right field defense. The Phillies last season were last in baseball, dead last in baseball in right field defense. It was something like 15 runs below average. So if Byrd can come in with some outfield assists, play some good, solid defense in right field, and if those two, Dominic Brown and Marlon Byrd, if they can combine for what they did last year, when they combined for 51 homers and about a 500 slugging percentage, that's going to be all the Phillies need from that 5-6 spot.
Now, I know Dominic Brown had 27 home runs last season. If he can hit 25 this year but make it a little bit more consistent, I think he'll be fine. Moving to the bullpen. A couple of pretty good arms out in the bullpen. Jake Diekman, he throws hard, but can he be consistent? Antonio Bastardo coming off that suspension, that's pretty big. And then Mike Adams, what do you get from him? So let's break it down with those three.
Yeah, with Diekman and Bastardo, the issue is it's the same thing for both guys. Can they limit the walks? The projections have them walking like 5 batters per 9 innings, and if that's the case, it's probably going to be an ugly 7th, 8th inning for the Phillies this season. And that 7th and 8th inning has been just a house of horrors for the Phillies the last 2 seasons. If you look at last year, in April, the Phillies relievers accounted for 6 of the 15 losses and had an ERA near 5. So that foretold season-long doom. I mean, the 8th inning was a terrible frame for the Phillies all last season and the season before. But if those two can come in, those are going to be the X factors because the Phillies are going to have a ton of 1-run leads to protect. And if they can get that bridge to Jonathan Papelbon with Diekman, Bastardo, and Mike Adams, they should be fine.
Okay, and maybe most importantly is Cole Hamels, A.J. Burnett. The rotation is a big part of this. We know Cole Hamels is going to miss some time. A.J. Burnett, though, is healthy. What do we need to see from them? We're going to need to see a pretty good season for both of them.
Yeah, the Phillies aren't going to have Cole Hamels until at least probably the 4th week of April. But if those two can combine for 60 starts, give you 390 innings, a strikeout per inning, and if they can combine for like a 340 ERA or below, that 2 and 3 spots in the rotation are going to be solidified, and they're going to have one of the strongest 1-2-3s in all of baseball. And that's not asking a ton because these are two guys who have had a ton of success over the last couple of years. Burnett, really, the last 2 years have been the best of his career.
I think they need 58 starts between the two of them, maybe close to a 3 ERA. It's going to be tough to get that, though, knowing Cole Hamels will be out for the first month. When we come back on Phillies Nation, we'll do By the Numbers. And also, don't forget to go to PhilliesNation.com and check out our Writers Roundtable. We need your help on that. We'll be right back here on Phillies Nation. Welcome back. It is Phillies Nation, brought to you by BQ Basement Systems. We're hanging out at McStew's in Levittown. And here's a segment we call By the Numbers. Corey, break it down. The Braves, we'll have to see a lot of them this season. What will they look like?
The Braves rotation looks ugly right now, downright ugly after the season-ending injuries to Chris Medlin and Brandon Beachy. And if you look at their projected starting rotation to begin the season, 2 of the members, Alex Wood and David Hale, have combined for 13 Major League starts in their career. Aaron Harang, who was recently signed to replace Freddie Garcia, has been with 6 teams in the last 11 months. So that tells you pretty much where Aaron Harang is in his career. Julio Teheran's going to be at the top, but right now with that ugly rotation and with the bullpen that's missing Johnny Venters, the Braves certainly look like a 500 team.
Well, they do. I still think that they are going to be the second best team in the National League East. I think the Nats are going to run away with it, but I do have the Braves ahead of the Phillies, although they're going to be pretty close. Not the same Braves that we knew from a year ago. And we move to the American League East and a new guy, Masahiro Tanaka. You got some stats on him?
I do. Masahiro Tanaka had a very impressive spring. He had a 2.14 ERA. He had 26 strikeouts to 3 walks. His splitter was just filthy. It was baffling hitters. And I'll tell you what, he signed an $155 million contract. Yeah. He doesn't look overhyped or overrated one bit. I think he's going to be in contention for the AL Cy Young.
Well, we know all about him from last season, 24-0 in Japan. And he's their 3rd starter in New York, which is pretty crazy to think. And finally, Cole Hamels. Some pretty crazy stats from Cole Hamels, and I found this to be just absolutely ridiculous. In 2013, Cole Hamels set the Major League record with 17 non-win quality starts. That's just ridiculous.
Well, that kind of is emblematic of what the Phillies have gone through the last few years, especially with Cliff Lee, too. No run support. I mean, you look at Cliff Lee, Over the last 2 years, he's been given 3.74 runs of support per game, which is the 4th fewest in all of baseball, and that explains why a guy like Cliff Lee, as well as he's pitched the last 2 years, only has 20 total wins.
And from our friends at Baseball Reference and their Twitter account, BREF Play Index, Cole Hamels has 74 career non-win quality starts. In those starts, he's 0-29 with a 2.41 ERA, a 1.02 WHIP, and an 8.6 K per 9 rate. It's just off the charts. Yeah. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. So knowing that Cole Hamels will be out for an extended period of time, it's looking like the first month. Let's go into the Phillies' first month schedule. How will they fare without Cole Hamels? It won't be easy knowing that one of their aces is going to be down for that period of time. They'll have to make do.
The Phillies' April schedule is certainly not favorable. They have a 10-game road trip out west. You know, usually you like to get that West Coast road trip out of the way early, but when you look at 4 games at the Dodgers, 3 at the Diamondbacks, and 3 at the Rockies, probably all 10 of those games without Cole Hamels, that could be an area where the Phillies struggle there the 3rd week of April.
And they really have little room for error without Cole Hamels, and last season they got off to a terrible start. 12-15 in April. They're going to need a better start than that, but it might be tough knowing that he's going to miss some time.
And if you look at the last 2 years total, the Phillies are 23-27 in April, and this year April matters more than any other year because you need to get off to a fast start so that the thought of rebuilding does not creep into the heads of anybody.
So the first few series, you got Texas, the Cubs, Milwaukee, then they go with Miami, 4 in Atlanta. Not going to be easy. You never want to see them get off to a tough start, and especially this season, knowing that they're probably in the 80, maybe to 85 win category. They've really got to come off strong. Let's go into our fantasy segment. It's brought to you by Draft Street, the future of fantasy sports. So we want to talk about our top breakout players for fantasy baseball in 2014. You've got 3, I've got 3. Hit them.
I have 2. One is,
you have 2. Okay.
One is Austin Jackson of the Tigers. I think that this is the year where he makes the leap to maybe stardom. Austin Jackson is going to be batting 5th in a potent Detroit lineup, which probably suits him better than leadoff because he strikes out so much. But batting behind Miguel Cabrera and Victor Martinez, 2 guys with 400 on base percentages, Jackson's going to have a ton of RBI opportunities there in the 5-hole.
Okay.
My other guy, Colton Wong, the Cardinals' rookie second baseman. He's a guy who's done nothing but hit in the minor leagues, 300 minor league career hitter, and he's in a very potent lineup. I think he's going to be a good player at a weak position.
I've got 2 Wills and a Jose. I've got Will Myers from the Rays, Will Middlebrooks from the Red Sox, and Jose Abreu from the White Sox. Look out for Will Myers. I think he's going to be an MVP in a couple of seasons. Tell us 3 guys that fantasy players should be looking out for to pick up as the season moves on.
Okay, well, 2 guys who had really strong springs that would be worth a look in the first 2 weeks of the season who are probably on your waiver wire. Brad Miller, the shortstop for the Mariners. He won the job from Nick Franklin this year, and he hit like .410 during the spring. Shortstop's the thinnest position in fantasy baseball, so I definitely give him a look. 2 closers to keep an eye on. Sergio Santos of the Blue Jays and J.J. Hoover of the Reds. They were both given these opportunities because their team's relievers, their team's closers went down with injuries to start the year. So if you're looking for saves, Hoover and Santos are 2 guys to eye. The 3rd guy is Michael Brantley of the Indians. Yeah. I don't know if he's on every waiver wire, probably not in a 12-team league, but if he is out there, I would grab him. He's either going to be batting 5th or leadoff for an Indians team, and he's going to score plenty of runs and pretty much a jack of all trades.
And that's Fantasy Baseball presented by DraftStreet.com, the future of fantasy sports. Visit DraftStreet.com. Use the promo code PhilliesNation to sign up for free one-day fantasy leagues where you can and win real cash prizes. We'll be right back on Phillies Nation presented by BQ Basement Systems.
Welcome back to Phillies Nation. I'm Ryan Williams here with Pat and Corey for our Batters Inbox Reader Comments and Questions sponsored by Village Catering. Our first question comes from Jack in Washington, D.C. What percentage do you see Cliff Lee getting traded sometime this season? Pat?
I would put 65%. That would be my number because I think eventually it's got to happen, right? And figure if they come down toward the deadline, July 31st is the trade deadline, you're probably looking at, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 games out, I would say the Phillies would probably be. And if they are more than 5 games out, they've got to move on from him. Ruben Amaro Jr. cannot be gun-shy when it comes to moving their top asset. The Phillies farm system is depleted. They've got to get something for him. They can't hold on to him just because he's a fan favorite, and people might be upset about it. Got to move on from him if the time is right. I put 65% on it.
Great points. I would go even higher. I'd say 75%. And the reason for that is the Phillies need 5 or 6 things to go right this season just to be in contention. And if they're not in contention, Cliff Lee is going to bring back more in a trade than anybody else on this team. And you won't see the Phillies hold on to so many guys at the deadline the way they did last year.
Well, with Cole Hamels being injured, I hope Cliffley doesn't get traded. Our next question comes from Paul in Cherry Hill. Was letting Kevin Franzen go the right move? Thoughts on that, Corey?
I don't think that it was the right move to let him go. I also don't think it was the right move to sign him to a $900,000 contract over the winter, guaranteeing him that money. Franzen is a decent bench bat, hits lefties really well, but it was just a little strange to see the Phillies commit more than $10 million to John Mayberry, Kyle Kendrick, and Kevin Franzen, three guys who were probably pretty replaceable.
Yeah, I agree. He wasn't on the hook for the $900,000 because he obviously goes to another team and they'll pay him that, but I don't know. It's just kind of an odd off season. I know that they really wanted to go with Cesar Hernandez instead, and why he's the odd man out and why they went with Jason Nix is because Nix can play shortstop and Kevin Franzen cannot. He was a pretty good bench bat for the time he was here. He had a good first season, a difficult second season. When he was thrust into more playing time, that was obviously an issue for him. Moving on from him, I don't think it's a big deal. You'll forget about a guy like Kevin Franzen. He was a nice guy, cool guy, great in the clubhouse, but he's a replaceable part.
Well, our next question comes from our Twitter page. Jackpot08 asked, what are the chances of Ken Giles having an impact on the Major League Club this season?
Jackpot08, was that Deshaun Jackson?
The odds of Ken Giles coming up at some point, I don't know. Ken Giles, he is a flame-throwing reliever in the Phillies system, 7th-round pick in 2011, throws 100 miles per hour. So he has some skills that the Phillies could definitely utilize in the back end of their bullpen where they don't really have a lot of velocity. But a guy like Philippe Oman, a guy like Ken Giles, I don't think they're going to be up until maybe August, maybe September.
It's going to be a problem if we see Ken Giles in May or June because that means there's major injuries across the board for the Phillies bullpen. He's a golden arm, Corey said it, 100-mile-per-hour fastball, but you don't want to rush guys like that. Philippe Oman has had issues. There's other guys that have come up through the minor leagues that have had issues. Jake Diekman is one of them who still kind of, has issues with walks. So I don't want them to rush Ken Giles. I want to see him in time. I do think we will see him by the end of the season. September call-ups, especially if the Phillies are out of contention, you will see him, but let's just not rush him.
Our last question comes from Jack M. in Westchester. Guess Mike Trout won't be a Philly after signing that contract. Does it make you guys sad?
You sad about that?
Very sad.
It's interesting because I do believe that Phillies fans actually thought that he could be a Philadelphia Philly, and it might happen in time, but for right now, Mike Trout, 6-year contract, $145 million. He'd be crazy to leave LA. Sonny, 75 every day? Why would you want to leave that?
Well, to those Phillies fans that are a little depressed that Mike Trout signed that 6-year deal, keep in mind, he's going to be only 29 years old when the deal expires, so he's going to be right in prime territory. Prime territory for a 10-year, $300 million contract, and the Phillies are one of the richest teams in baseball, so I wouldn't be surprised to see them in the running for Trout 6 years from now.
I will say this, what does help him, obviously, is that he's from Millville, New Jersey, and he grew up a Phillies fan. He tailgated at the Phillies World Series. So if you have that, if you can hold on for 6 more seasons, Phillies fan, maybe you will eventually see Mike Trout wearing red pinstripes. But the Angels have him for now. And man, I would love to get an MVP candidate every single season like Mike Trout will be, but it's just not in the cards.
Well, here's a follow-up question. Do you see Mike Trout win the MVP this season?
I actually do. I thought that Mike Trout should have won the last 2 AL MVPs and not Miguel Cabrera. Look, he's the best player on the planet. That's taking nothing away from Miguel Cabrera. He had a great season, Triple Crown, all that stuff. Mike Trout's just a better overall player. He should have won the AL MVP twice already. I think it's eventually going to happen this year. I think that you believe the same, but what about the National League?
Well, first off, with Trout, it's hard to pick against a guy like Cabrera who won a Triple Crown 2 years ago and improved upon those numbers last year. Over in the NL, I have Ryan Braun, and I'm going to tell you why. It's not a popular pick, but Ryan Braun's going to come back trying to prove himself. He was already a .312 career hitter before the PED bust, guy who has 30-30 potential. He's going to play right field this year where he's going to be a little bit better defensively, and I think the Brewers are going to surprise some people. Yeah. So I have Ryan Braun winning the NL MVP.
I'm going to go with Paul Goldschmidt. You like him?
I love him.
All right, great.
That wraps up our Batters Inbox reader comments and questions, sponsored by Village Catering. Be sure to visit villagecatering.com to check out how you can reserve their huge banquet hall in the Northeast Philly for your next event. Don't touch that remote. We'll be right back with more Phillies news.
Hey Phillies Nation, it's Natalie Eganoff down here at the Phillies 5K, where over 5,000 fans run in honor of Phillies charities. And on the first beautiful day of spring, runners pace the perimeter of Citizens Bank Park, where more than 590 cities across 17 states were represented. For participants like back-to-back champ Paul Matuzak, the Phillies 5K is a chance to compete and train for another busy running season.
There's different racing periods, so right now is the beginning of one racing period, and it'll go through some different I'll enter some college track meets on the outdoor track, and that'll probably go through June.
But not everyone takes the 5K so serious. After all, today is a unique opportunity to do some good throughout the city. Phillies Charities hosts events all season that benefit dozens of organizations in the Delaware Valley. And for a lot of the runners, this race serves as a reminder that the Phillies are a common bond that brings the city together.
Throughout the year, we're doing a lot of events like this, but at the end of each year, that money is donated through grants. So it goes out to those in need in our communities, which is great for all these runners donating that money to charities. It goes back to their community.
You don't really know how many 5,500 people are until you get out here and you see. It's just a sea of people making their way down the street. They close everything off, they make their way around the ballpark and down the streets here in South Philadelphia, but it is a lot of people. It's pretty cool to watch.
For two of the 5,500 runners, today was about much more than just the race. Andrew Filowitz decided to end his Phillies 5K on one knee.
I mean, this atmosphere, this is something you won't forget, you know, and the other thing that's cool is this happens every year, so it'll be like an anniversary of your proposal, which is cool.
This is the
First
race
time.
I made him run with me.
It was expensive. I had to buy a ring and I had to buy running shoes. So.
Now,
But-
how were you shocked? What was your reaction when you found out? I don't even remember. I'm so surprised.
It's a special day for the newly engaged couple, but for the rest of the Phillies fans in attendance, it's the first chance to paint the town red, all in anticipation for opening day at Citizens Bank Park. For Phillies Nation TV, I'm Natalie Yaganoff.
Thank you, Natalie. Some good stuff from the Phillies 5K. We're back here at Mixed Stews. Pat and Corey with you. And before we get to our predictions, because we've got to put a number on this season, let's talk about Ruben Amaro Jr. and what the future might hold for him. Let's say the Phillies are 10 games out when it comes to the trade deadline. Will he even be here? Will he be here to do the selling if the Phillies need to? And if they are in it, and they don't make the playoffs, will he be here after this season? A lot of questions pertaining to Ruben Amaro. He's on the hot seat.
Sure, you know, despite the mistakes made by this regime in the previous couple years, I do think that Ruben Amaro will be the Phillies general manager through the 2015 season, and I'll tell you why. Ryan Sandberg, okay? Very rarely do you see a new GM come into a situation and be told that he will not have his own manager. And the Phillies aren't going to can Ryan Sandberg after having him work towards this position. Sure. So it's going to be difficult to get rid of a guy like Amaro, even if it might make sense for some Phillies fans to bring in an entire new regime there. So I do think that he will be here for the long haul.
I hate to do it, but I think I do agree with you. I think he's going to be here throughout the rest of the season. And this is one thing about the Phillies organization. They're very close-knit, very tight, family-oriented kind of an organization. I doubt, and it went against the grain when they fired Charlie Manuel in season last year. They don't really do things like that. I doubt they'll do it 2 years in a row. Now, what's the number that you put on the Phillies season?
I'm actually more bullish on the Phillies than most people. I'm going to go 85 wins, an 85 and 77 record, and the reason for that is because I see Jake Diekman, Antonio Bastardo, Brad Lincoln, Mike Adams, and Jonathan Papelbon forming a very good bullpen. And the bullpen has been a struggle in the last 2 years. It's an area that the Phillies are going to have to thrive. And if they can have a good record, one-run games, I can see 85 wins.
I'm going to go 80 and 82. I just don't know that the entire core is going to be able to stay healthy throughout the season. And they're already missing Cole Hamels in the beginning of the year. I think 80 wins is a fair assessment. Well, that's Phillies Nation, brought to you by BQ Basement Systems, your go-to basement specialist in the Delaware Valley. You can check out Corey's work at csnphilly.com. You can listen to me on 97.5 The Fanatic on Sundays, 8 to 12. And Monday, I'll be with Jason Stark from ESPN from 6 to 7. For Natalie, for Ryan, for Corey, I'm Pat. Come check out McStew's Irish Pub. It's a great place to watch a Phillies game. That's it for us. We'll talk to you next week.